Ever since we had the introduction of the Agar Scepter into the game, a lot of people hoped that maybe one day we could get a trace rifle, at least a legendary one, of the stasis affinity to go in the kinetic slot. And or also a strand trace rifle, although the Agars came out way before strand was even like thought of. The main thing to highlight is just that people wanted a legendary trace rifle that you could use in the kinetic slot. Well, this season we finally have one. Actually, as a matter of fact, we didn't get just one, we got two. That's right, we actually in this season got both a legendary stasis trace rifle and a legendary strand trace rifle. Although this video we're going to be primarily talking about and focusing on the new legendary first of its kind stasis trace rifle. That being none other than the ADATA. It is a seasonal weapon in which you can go about crafting your very own roll with exactly what you want on it. You can get it from any of the seasonal activities, or of course the main way, decode your Season of the Wish Ingrams into copies of the trace rifle at the Spirit of Riven and hope you get those juicy red borders. We'll briefly talk about the strand trace rifle at the end of this video. And real quick, before we look at the trace rifle a little bit further, I gotta mention you guys about the homies over at Instant Gaming. Their sole purpose is to save you money on games and or those games DLCs. And yes, that does include the final shape. So make sure to head over to Instant Gaming, save yourself some money on games and those games DLCs. Alright, first things first. Let's go ahead and look at this weapon's origin trait, which is Dragon's Vengeance. When an ally dies or you reach critical health, this weapon's magazine refills and it gains bonus range, charge rate, and handling. Although I think the charge rate is actually bugged and it doesn't provide any boost to its charge rate when this origin trait is proc. But either way, this thing's a trace rifle, so that doesn't really matter in this scenario. Now, does it? Now, if we actually go ahead and throw up this trace rifle's perk pool, our first legendary trace rifle in the kinetic slot, you'll see that there are some rolls that could at least pique the interest. Now, in the third column, you could actually argue that you have four pretty decent options, with one of those options being a sleeper with enlightened action. Although for this specific weapon, I don't really think enlightened action is going to be all that good. So our main perks are definitely going to be overflow. Overflow is a really good perk on special and primary weapons for that matter, as going more than double your magazine size is always welcome in these parts, especially if you have the enhanced version. It can go up to 120% increased magazine capacity. And you do have clown cartridge as well. Clown cartridge is generally used on weapons you use in a damage phase. You're not really going to be using a trace rifle in a DPS phase, but you know, it could be useful. Although I think the other top tier perk in the third column is going to come to no surprise when I mention good old tried and true demolitionist. Final blows of this weapon generate an improved amount of grenade energy, and whenever you eat one of your grenades, you're going to reload your weapon, which is very useful. And because this is a special weapon, it is going to give you a solid 22% of your grenade charge, as long as the perk is enhanced, and the normal version will give you 20%. Best perks in the third column are definitely Overflow and Demolitionist in my opinion. And then in the fourth column, there are some other stuff that may catch your eyes. So, we'll start off with a pretty fun roll that is actually going to be Wellspring. The reason why I even mention this perk is because it grants 8 ability energy split equally amongst all uncharged abilities. And if you only have one ability that's not charged, it'll get that full 8%. Also, by the way, Wellspring is 9% when enhanced, meaning if your grenade is the only uncharged ability that you have currently at the moment, and you have both Demolitionist and Wellspring on this trace rifle, it'll give you a solid 31% of your grenade back, so long as you have both of these perks enhanced. This is a stasis weapon, so yes, it does have headstone as well, but keep in mind, trace rifles aren't really the hardest hitting a weapon, so you know, maybe proccing headstone isn't going to be as efficient on this weapon as you may think, but it is here in case you want to use it. Now, it does have attrition orbs, although I haven't not used attrition orbs, so I don't really know how often you're going to be able to spawn orbs of power while using this perk. But as a utility weapon with something like Demolitionist and attrition orbs, that could be very useful, as you'd be spawning orbs just by dealing damage And whenever you would get a kill, you would get some decent grenade energy back to you, which could definitely be pretty useful for a utility weapon. If it had shoot slew in the third column, that would be really cool. Although Overflow and Demolitionist are still really good third column perks. I do want to mention One For All because it is such an easy damage perk to activate, especially on these types of weapons. Basically primaries and trace rifles act very similar to primary weapons. But after damaging 3 separate enemies within 3 seconds of each other, you're going to get 35% increased damage for 10 seconds. Which can definitely be useful going against some more healthier enemies, just having a pretty easy 35% damage buff that you can activate. But this weapon does also have Killing Tally, which can get up to a 30% permanent increased damage as long as you are not sewing the weapon or reloading it, which is why something like Overflow could come in handy, as that would allow you to keep shooting this weapon and having a permanent 30% damage buff up, which could be pretty useful. Now, I would recommend really trying to think of the scenario in which you'd be using this. For example, if you are a Cenotaph Warlock, you would be using this in higher end content, stuff like GMs, Master Raids, Master Dungeons, anywhere where there's champions or enough enemies that you can make heavy ammo off of while using a trace rifle to justify using Cenotaph, because Cenotaph is a pretty darn good helmet. So if you're in a GM, something like Overflow and Killing Tally could be really good on a Cenotaph Warlock, because you could get a fatter mag and you would just not have to worry about reloading even less, because you have Overflow for a fat mag and Cenotaphs passively just always refilling your trace rifle anyways. Although maybe something like Overflow and Attrition Orbs could be good to just spawn more Orbs of Power to get armor charge for your special finishers, because you're most likely going to be using this trace rifle on a double special loadout, as a trace rifle's main job is to function as a primary on a double special loadout and then swap off of it onto another special weapon right before your damage phase starts. For example, since this trace rifle, the app, is in the kinetic slot, you can hot swap over to Izanagi right before a damage phase starts and load up your own dead shot. Have that bad boy ready to be going in your rocket rotation for your rocket Izzy swaps or whatever you may be doing. Or you could also swap it over to Witherhoard or any other kinetic special weapon that you may choose. Of course, in a GM, you're not going to be able to do that, but you're on a Cenotaph anyways. And overall, I feel like this weapon does have a decent amount of versatility to it, some utility to it, which is really all you're asking for in a trace rifle. And you're not going to use it as your main form of damage against a healthier champion, a healthier major. Of course, you're not going to actually be continuously shooting a boss with it in a damage phase, but you can use it as a pseudo primary weapon while storing up some ammo for your other special weapon that you're going to swap it to. A pretty darn decent trace rifle, and it's a legendary Stasis 1, which automatically gives it some value. Now real quick, I do want to briefly mention the other new legendary trace rifle that can go in the kinetic slot. That is the Incisor, a new Trials weapon. Crap, I gotta play PvP for it. And this legendary strand trace rifle looks like there could be some utility with it. Here is the weapons perk pool. I think that there could be some utility with something like Slice inside of a GM, so you can sever targets from a distance and just have them do less damage to you, especially if they are tankier enemies. Maybe like some orange bar snipers. Those enemies be doing a lot of damage to you for no reason. And then maybe Attrition Orbs in the fourth column to go with Slice as a just true utility weapon. I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing, but you can take a quick little look at the perk pool, pause the video, and go ahead and form your opinion on it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the new Stasis Trace Rifle and the Strand one too, why not? And thank you so much for watching the video. You guys be safe. Look forward to the new dungeon tomorrow. We'll see you in the next one. Adios.